Another response video to Luddite Returns. Might be the last one. If this is all he's got, then he's got nothing. So anyway, I guess this is his Efilism video, Efilism Defended. And he was going to do it so magnificently that, yes, put us all to shame. And, it has to be the most incomprehensible bag of crap I've ever listened to. I mean, it's just puts Professor Anton to shame. There's just, whatever, word salad, whatever you want to call this crap. But anyway, so yeah, let's do it. Why not?
Introspection has revealed that likening myself unto Proteus, the shape-shifting figure of Greek mythology, is accurate.
Yeah, so you liken yourself to superheroes. Yeah, okay, I can do that too. But just had me thinking. What if we could? What if there was a trail of where we had been? There was some way we could see what we actually were. Like we did live previous lives, but we had no memory of them, no hard memory, but just some loose connections. And that we'd have these same connections to the future. What if the game was that explicit and you could actually see it? Like if you were a slave owner and you could actually see what percentage of your future was going to be caught up in those slaves. What were the odds of your soul being born to those slaves? That kind of thing. Maybe there'd be greater appreciation. When you look at the human race, do you say to yourself, oh yeah, I would take any of those lives over no life at all? Peace, quiet, nothing. You'd rather be one of them. Is that how you look at most of humanity? Do you look at most of humanity and say, yes, sign me up for that life? Because, yeah, I look at it as with horror. I say I'd rather have my arm cut off in this life than have to live their life in the future.
By disposition, a profound fallibilism penetrates and colors all that I am and all that I approach. The experience of ambivalence, even contradiction, is perhaps the defining feature of my life.
There you go. Yeah, so there's a huge distinction between me and you. Because I've never seen it. It's always been quite obvious. The only contradiction, I can't even call it a contradiction. It's just a recognition of my own failure. My failure to be Spockian. My failure to honor the truth in so many circumstances. But the fact that there's never been any contradiction. There's never been any notion of living a life where you're not taking. Where you just can't avoid it, where you just can't avoid the scheming that you do, in part, and the not the neglect, but the I'm glad it's them and not me kind of crap that goes on inside of my head. There's no contradiction about that. I know exactly what that is. That's just being a selfish son of a bitch. Yeah.
Being the case, I am in a state of perpetual war within myself, and as at its core, most penetrating, Efilism is the affirmation of non-being, and biophilia its opposite. In a sense,
biophilia. I mean, where do you come up with this crap? Biophilia. I guess some like life is a fetish now. You have a fetish for life. You're a biophilite. Yeah. Well, that's another problem I never had, right? Because right from the start, I knew the biosphere was a dangerous place. That it wasn't rainbows and purity. That there was this ugly caterpillar part of it. The shit. I was always quite aware of the fact that everything is shitting. That the shit is everywhere.
all of my life has been a civil war. At the periphery, I find myself at odds with almost every single expression of Efilism. More towards the center,
Yeah, well, that doesn't even make any sense, right? Every single expression of Efilism? What? The fact that, okay, yeah, as a male, I certainly have, no real awful hard need to change diapers, take care of kids, have small talky, whiny little baby talk conversations with little things. I just don't need it. I don't want it. I have no use for it. You have a contradiction with that. You do have a need for it. You need to cuddle children or something. You have some passion for it. You love their small talk. Well, I don't want to go into it, but... And then beyond that, that's just on the personal level, right? The personal level says, yeah, I don't have any personal need, okay, to have children. The only reason I could possibly contrive to want to create them is to create vainly copies of myself. That would just be pure vanity. I have no fortune to leave a kid. I'm not desperate to find somebody's pockets to throw my fortune into. So, just by nature alone, without any agenda, without any need, it's like being it's like being allergic to meat and being a vegetarian. Well, yeah, you can still be a vegetarian for ethical reasons, but it's sure going to be convenient if you're allergic to meat. So, I'm already allergic to the problem people seem to have such a need for. So, but there's never been a contradiction. Like I said, the moments of my life where I've spent any time contemplating the idea of having kids, which is mostly before I was 15 years old, again, were just moments of vanity. Nothing else.
I find the ethic that utilizes an analogical guillotine and bifurcates or dichotomizes persons, such that persons simpliciter are absolutely and utterly divorced from value.
Yeah, well, I don't even know what that means. So, again, nothing's divorced from value. Nothing, certainly in the philosophy of Efilism, would ever divorce one from value. So, sometime in your life, somehow you were divorced from value, or sometimes you have some sort of conflict where you don't realize that other feeling things feel, and they can have good days or bad days, and that you can help them have a good day or a bad day by what you do. That is complicated. You're in conflict about that. You can't fully understand that that's the reality of your existence. I don't know. No problem for me, anyway.
Where only the averse experiences of persons have value.
Yeah, well, again, it's not that they're the only ones that have value. You're just not quite getting it. There's value in rescuing somebody from a bad circumstance. There's value in making people happy. The argument is that the discomfort and the unhappiness is a pre-loaded spring. It's created out of tensions and irritations and burdens and obligations. That's what compresses the spring that makes any of this possible to go forward. Is you have to go backwards first. You have to walk backwards. You have to be born backwards. That's sort of the way it works, right?
Find this dispositionally repulsive.
Well, again, that means something, right? So something's repulsive dispositionally. The idea that what is that you have to be hungry for food to have value. You have to have, for ambitions to have a purpose. You have to have an ego that needs the gratification or the reward or the adulation or the applause of the crowd. You don't see that that's sort of a negative psychology, that you would need to validate yourself with applause, that would be somehow a negative psychological feature, not a positive one. And if it's just the factual truth should be repulsive. Yeah, I don't know. Irritating and obnoxious, but I don't know if repulsive would be fair for what the way it is.
Sinner this state of confliction reaches its height. In discussing the end of all things for several years, it has often been my experience.
It's not the end of all things, you know. I mean, again, your life is going to end anyway, alright? You're just not going to escape that. And it's just a silly delusion to imagine that I'll create some sort of monstrosity, okay, and somehow I won't die because it lives. You know, that's not going to work either. It's just not. It's not going to change the fact that your life is going to end. It's going to be the end of all things for you, for your knowledge, for your sensibilities. And what's going to be out there are one of those people, one of the ones out there. Again, would you go live their life? Would you go live the average human existence? Voluntarily just sign up for that? Sign up to be a mundane, ignorant fool? A sheep? Bah! Yeah, I don't know. I don't think you would.
That moral or value realists are prone to psychologize. Those subscribing to axiological and or moral nihilism, the charge goes something like this. Nihilism is in denying notions of cognition-independent normativity, or in the denial of good and bad metaethically, in short, a variation of justification via negating justification. An attempt to short...
Yes, that's right. A shortcut, a cheat, a big pile of crap that's just made obvious. Again, if you're going to concede you're conscious, you can't really argue that the other people aren't. It's not irrational. It's not reasonable. It's outside the realm of reasonable perception to imagine the rest of the universe, the rest of the human and animal life on this planet as being something other than just as real and alive and sensitive as you. That their welfare is just as really important and just as necessarily important. That their comfort's just as real, just as necessarily important. So again, you see the evidence of nihilism even in people who would claim not to be nihilists. Because they do, in effect, in action, indeed, negate the reality of those people's welfare. They compromise it and exploit it aggressively, claiming that that's getting the most out of their life. Yeah, right. It's stealing from Peter to pay Paul. That's all. Not complicated.
Circuit, as it were. Moral responsibility and a vehicle to license any action deemed preferable. The charge is hasty and perhaps...
Any deed deemed, I imagined it, I feel it, I have an impulse. Yeah, life based on impulses. We see people doing it, right? They impulse buy, they impulse drink, they impulse everything. Alright, it's all over the place. They just get a notion in their silly heads, they act on it, and something blows up. Yeah, that's called failure.
It's itself a psychological defense mechanism. An attempt to render the other so at variance, the other so monstrous in the eyes of the accuser, a less intimidating, a figure less haunting. And I believe nihilism is a kind of haunting. It penetrates and colors one's whole experience, though perhaps and often unawares. Clandestine.
Yeah, well, whatever. I don't know how. I guess the nihilism that's overt certainly isn't clandestine, but maybe we agree that there's a lot of people out there who are not defined as nihilists, but they're behaving as if nihilism had some sort of legitimate character, some sort of functional, logical possibility as a reality, as if there was a non-consequential world outside of themselves, which doesn't make any sense.
A banalized nihilism is likely reflective of a prior banalization of character, an existentially concrete banalization. As against the charge of nihilism a la preference, satisfaction, justification, The nihilist may perhaps have the strength, remembering Nietzsche, how much truth can a spirit bear? How much truth can a spirit dare?
Yeah, well, is that even a reasonable question, right? Doesn't matter, does it? Whether you can bear it or not, should that decide what truth gets accepted? Is how much you can bear? How much you're willing? Yeah, it's just too bad. No, the truth should win, even if it kills you. Yeah, the truth is bigger than you are. The truth is more than you are. You're not allowed to compromise the truth. There's nothing inside of you that you can defend as being worthy, having a right to step on the truth. Sorry, no way.
To stand before the abyss and confirm that which at their core, in the deepest levels of their being, they would prefer not to confirm. There is only the world and horror. No
Yeah, well, I don't even know if it goes that deep, okay? Because it really doesn't. On an emotional level, I don't think you'd ever do that. There's always going to be cute ducky. There's always going to be some perceptions, some love, some emotion, some beautiful act, some beautiful deed. There's always going to be something that you will subjectively have. The fact that it is crap, all of it, doesn't change the fact that emotionally you're never going to be able to see it all as crap. It's very hard to get bleak enough to see it all as crap, every inch of it. So that's not even true. Facing the abyss is not that difficult, because you'll emotionally always have hope and dreams and wish, and you'll always have too the dignity and the beauty that you've seen here, that you've seen in other people, that you know. So I mean, even if it is a delusion, it's a delusion you still take with you to the abyss. It's just the abyss is saying to you, this is where you're going to end up, so you might as well gracefully walk your way through. Don't let it come get you. You meet it. You do it your way. And don't let your way be, I will pretend it doesn't exist. I'll pretend the abyss isn't going to win. As it is going to win. It can do it gracefully, or it can do it hard.
Categorical normativity, no transcendent imperative, no moral reality as against preference satisfaction.
Well, that's just silly, right? So, I mean, obviously there's lots of moral imperative that goes way beyond, personal crap, subjective desire, want, ambitions, all of that crap. So I don't even get what you're saying there at all. What you're acting in is in the moral imperative is what's taking you to the abyss. The abyss isn't, you're not driven to the abyss by emotion, you're driven to the abyss by understanding.
No possible world outside of one's own head such that the actual world is or may become the possible world it ought to be. Nothing in summary to stop Marquis de Sade.
Well, whatever. Ought to be, the world it ought to be. Again, the question is, is there any world it can be? Is there any legitimately rational description of something suitable to the needs of the universe? Is there any gift you can give to something that doesn't need anything? Ponder that one. Something that doesn't need eyeglasses, it doesn't need a clothes, it doesn't need a suitcase, it doesn't go down the list. It doesn't need anything you have. There's nothing you can build that it needs. That's your problem. That's the dilemma. There is no fixing, because we are the broken.
And company other than preference backed by brute force. No creator, no experiential metacontext that negates the metacontextual and ultimate futility of all things. Now, the following is grounded in the writings of the great French philosopher Emmanuel Levinas, and he has this to say, summarizing, if you will.
Ah, you mean misparaphrasing, if you will. That you tend to do that heavily. But go ahead, play with your little French guy.
If being is understood, in part, as the continuation in being of being as replication of being, then the ethical event must be understood as a break, a rupture in being.
Well, whatever. I mean, all of this crap is just kind of crap, right? I mean, all the other living animals on this planet aren't bothered by any of these existential angst crap, because they don't have to deal with the question, right? Being is just day to day, dealing with life as it comes, because they can't do anything else. So our dilemma is the fact that we can understand the context of our existence, and the fact that it does come to an end. And the question is does, under these circumstances, is there any point in just feeding this momentum machine? That's all it runs on, is a kind of momentum. Shouldn't it have some real force behind it? Shouldn't it have some legitimacy? If it's just a tumbling weed, okay, and there's just damage left behind because nothing constructive can be done, it's only a destructive force. Is there any reason not to take the wind out of this tornado?
And the other is, as against an existent subject's being as process, that is, being as continuation, revealed to said subject as valuable, even unto the ending of one's own being as process, being as cannibalism, being as process applicable to both conscious life and non-living existence, continues itself as against the being as process of other existence.
Oh, whatever. I mean, I don't know where you're going with this crap, but again, what does this have to do with this simple realization that we do know what having kids is? It's playing God. Do you have a right by some force that gave you rights, some legitimate test you passed, some legitimate standard that gave you the power to create? No. And if you really analyze it and you say, well, how should I legitimize that power, my use of that power? What's the responsible use of the power? And I don't think if you're going to sit there, once you're going to ask that question, I don't think you're going to come up with an answer. There is no way to responsibly use that power.
Shows no quarters, as it were, no mercy, and though conscious, of course, consciousness being the condition of this possibility, may act as if unconscious, indifferent, uncaring, and perhaps more forcefully, actively against the being of other existence. And hearkening unto Sartre's Cartesian bifurcation of being in itself and being for itself, in which he reversed the Aristotelian.
Yeah, regardless. So again, we could get into an argument about standards. Like, what standards, right? We all have our own standards for when life is unacceptable. I could write a scenario, and maybe some people would force me to be preposterous, and say you have to suffer with fire boiling in a pot of boiling oil for 1 billion years before you would cry uncle and say, okay, living wouldn't be worth that. 100-year lifespan wouldn't be worth spending 1 billion years having my skin burned off. But the point is we all have a standard that says this isn't good enough. And, I clearly say, yes, I look at the world, I look at the way the animals function, I look at the attrition rates, and I say, this isn't good enough. I say, even if you made it so much better than it is, it still isn't good enough. Because it's still a negative engine. It's still an engine contriving an excuse for its existence, creating a mess so it can clean up a mess. It is an insane process, and it's humiliating to see intelligence duped by it. seriously playing the game, as if it isn't, as if the game isn't just as obvious as tic-tac-toe. It's like watching Einstein play tic-tac-toe. It's humiliating.
Tradition such that being or actuality is always and everywhere ontologically antecedent to becoming potentiality. I am attempting to come to terms here with what seems to me a profound reversal. Plato identified the being of beings, or existence, as the good, and contended all existence in the process of becoming strove for the being of beings.
Whatever, who cares? What? So because Plato says so, I'm supposed to say, oh, gee, that's so persuasive. I mean, it's not an argument, right? It's just some sort of statement. I just don't see how it undoes anything. How does it unravel the fact that it's a replicating molecule that Plato didn't know anything about? But that's all it is. It's a molecule replicating. It's a virus. It is, in practical fact, that's what it is. It's a replicating piece of matter. Replicating for the sake of replication. What would Plato say to that? What would you imagine he would say to that truth?
Such as is the case, ethics was not otherwise than being, but becoming towards being. And Emmanuel Levinas flips this around. The dilemma, I suppose, or the possibility raised by Emmanuel Levinas is, would that which is wholly or purely ethical, would that of necessity shun or castigate being as process, being as its own replication? That is, would the ethical event, as he describes it, be not merely otherwise than being, right, but as intrinsically as against being? These days, and perhaps...
Oh, please. What was that? I can't do anything with that. The question is, again, playing God. You're saying you know what's best for this sentient creature. I'm telling you, I'm giving you fair warning. There are psychologies like mine who will be born to this world. They'll absorb knowledge, they'll absorb experiences, and very early on they'll have contempt for this existence. They'll have contempt for the sloppiness of the world they exist in. They won't say thank you. And your response to them is what? I don't care? Shut up? Fuck you? Too bad? Yeah. And you're going to talk to me about ethics?
Through the ages of history, one hears whispers. Whispers that are growing louder. And what do they say? They purport to reveal a truth that we are, in effect, designed, qual evolution, to reject. And if not reveal a truth, to express it prescriptively. The ever louder whispers exhort.
Whatever. Yeah, the prescription is grow a clue, grow a justification. Again, we're back to that word, but yeah, it's an important thing. If you're going to sit there and act aggressively, play God, well then you ought to have all your little justification soldiers in a row, right? You ought to have all that stacked up right. You ought to have a rock-solid explanation for why you're not only competent, but that what you're doing is in fact the right thing to do. You should be able to defend the action. It's an aggressive act. You should be able to defend it. That seems a reasonable minimal ethic. And what is your sampling of the justifications? I just hear resorts to nature. I hear resorts to culture. I hear resort to everyone else's doing it. I don't hear any justifications.
Express a desire, concretized by command. End the living. Embrace.
Whatever, end the living. That's not, again, what it's about. It's stopping one aspect of fetish life. The fetish of your dependency, need, your urgent have to. I have to play God. I have to create life. Right? It's that one element of life. That's all. Your life is still your life. You live it. You can live it without doing this act. This act isn't necessary to you having a life, living a life, enjoying a life. No more than eating meat is some sort of I have to. Billions of people prove you don't have to.
Non-being. In the deepest levels within myself, what haunts me most profoundly are the screams. The unfathomable tragedy is they've always been around, and often we survive only insofar as we can ignore them. But Ivan Karamazov has always had reason to reject the ticket. Screams of suffering. Might not the supreme ethical event be the rupture in being that occurs when the whispers become as loud as the screams? That is, when being as process is ended and mankind embraces its own extinction.
Yeah, well, that much didn't even make much sense. So what was your point? So you're complaining about the whispers. I assume the whispers are the ones arguing for some sort of caution, care, some sort of, hey, let's see if we can find a fail-safe way to do this. Let's see if we can find a way where everybody wins. Let's see if we can find some way where we don't do this reckless thing over and over and over again, where you have a justification. Let's see if we can write one of those for you. And those are the whispers, and somehow those whispers are somehow connected to the screamers. Somehow you hear the screams, you don't hear the screams, you hear the screams of what? I want to live? Are the Martians screaming now? I need to live, I want to live, I want to ride a purple pony. Are they yelling that in your ear? What screams are you hearing? I don't know. The screams of your dependencies, the screams of your addictions being severed? I don't know. But regardless, it doesn't matter, it really doesn't. So anyway, again, I think we could just settle on the word justification. People will either live a life justified or unjustified. And if it's going to, and I would argue that they are not going to procreate living a justified life. You can only commit the acts if you run from your obligation to justify your life. So anyways, I think we're done. Enough of this for today. Yeah, see you tomorrow. Same Efilist channel, same Efilist time, such.